Welcome to Been There, Done That, the second best project management podcast on this planet. Very few circumstances in project management align with a textbook. This podcast walks the wild spaces in project management and provides insights you won't get on a canned podcast.
All right, let's talk about project failure. I often see project managers get hung up in like feeling responsible for project fails. And I used to feel that way. And I started to realize that a project manager's job is not necessarily to make the project succeed. It's definitely a good end state to have. You really have to be the impartial third party who's using tools like properly structured schedules, proper tracking, and proper reporting so you can inform the team about current status and the likelihood of being able to deliver according to the schedule. The way that plays out is I'm looking at a schedule and I'm telling team members, you have this thing that's due on next week, Friday, and this is critical path. So if you go a day late, it impacts the end date. If you go a day early, you're buying time for other people. And I think a lot of times the project managers will not have a properly structured schedule, which means they're kind of flying blind. They're basically going with the warm and fuzzy project management status tracking, which doesn't work. I've seen people try to use it. It does not work. I like the data. So part of what happens then is the project manager starts to get confirmation bias or optimism. We always seem to be optimistic about things when we think it's going to succeed, and we think it's not going to succeed. We start getting pessimistic. So our role as a project manager is to make sure that everybody in the team, including the stakeholders and the sponsors and all, understand what the impact is of deliverables and when things will deliver based on the progress being made so far. And then let them decide how to manage that. So for me to tell somebody, you have to deliver by Friday, typically I have no control over that person. That person might be working on multiple projects for multiple project managers, may not be a high priority for them. And I have another podcast where I talk about prioritization and how it really is not very well managed by organizations, which would help if we could get prioritization. So the person who's doing the work knows I need to work on project L before I work on project A, because L is a higher priority according to the organization. So if we are tracking, if we have a properly built tools and we're tracking things and we're making sure that we're communicating current status and people understand the impact of being late, then there's not much I can do beyond that to make sure that the work gets done. Other than daily scrums, I'll do sometimes, just so everybody can feel the franticness of having to get the delivery done. So at that point, it's no longer my responsibility whether the thing delivers or not, but I do have a responsibility to report back to the sponsor to let them know that here's where we are and here's what's going to happen. Like, we're up against critical path. The team has not been delivering on time. They know what the status is. They know why they need to deliver, but they're not doing it. Now it becomes the sponsor's problem. And I'll give you an example where this was an issue on a project. So a few years back, I was working for an organization. And again, like any stories I tell here is not about the organization I'm talking about, because this is standard stuff I run into on every place I work at or ever worked at. So this person was managing, it was a large alliance project where the company I was working for had expertise. Another company had access to the people that could buy the service of the expertise we had. And then a third party basically is running software in order to put it all back together, pull databases, help build the product out. So I was not on that project until the project manager was going away for a 30-day vacation. So they said, hey, can you step in and just kind of help out with this thing? I was like, yeah, okay. As a project manager, we have three levers we can pull, right? We can look at the schedule, we can look at the scope, and we can look at the cost. So I tried to look for cost info and it wasn't really good. It was kind of shoddy. So I started going through and looking at, how do I get the numbers? So I started pulling the numbers. I started saying, all right, how much have we invested so far in this product? So I go through and I say, okay, how many people are in the meetings, the twice a week meetings that are basically costing the code or costing this project? And then how much are we paying out to the third party to make the changes to the platform to make it align with what the customer wants? And it was a big number. So I said, okay, I figured that out. Here we are, I know what the costs are, but now what I need to know is what's the income potential. So this is where I'd work for other organizations that track sales. And typically, the way organizations track sales, if they don't know what they're doing, is everything is a coin flip. So when a proposal goes out, it gets logged as 50% likelihood to close. What happens is if it sells, it's marked as sold. That's 100% sold, right? If it doesn't sell, it goes to zero. Well, it's not going to be a coin flip over time. So I found in other organizations I'd worked at is that roughly 15, 20, 25% of the proposals end up being sold. So with that in mind, I started looking at the forecast, which the marketing team had on this project I'm on. and I say, "Hey, what's the market potential here?" And they're like, "Oh, it's amazing. We're gonna make so much money in this." I said, "Oh, just give me some numbers. What are they?" Said, "Well," then they showed me their tracking sheet, the marketing group, and I said, "All right, in May we have $20 million that has a 50% likelihood chance of closing." I said, "Well, that's great. That's like 10 million, right?" "Yeah, yeah." April comes, May goes. I go back and I say, "What do we sell?" 120,000. And I went, but wait a minute. Like I'm a project manager, so like I'm not real fast with math. But $20 million with a 50% likelihood of closing should be $10 million or something close to it, shouldn't it? And they said, "Oh, well, no, that's not the way we track it." I said, "Okay, well, why do we bother putting a percentage likelihood of closing on proposals if it doesn't matter?" So it was a very interesting conversation. So then I went back in and I started plotting the numbers out and looking at it and say, what's the break even point? There wasn't one because we were already in the hole. There was no coming out of the hole. So, I had to figure out, how do I do this in a way where I'm just the temp. I'm sitting here for 30 days. What do I do with this? So I didn't want to get accusational or anything like that, accusatory. So what I did is I pulled the numbers together. I put it in Excel, which this is something Excel is good for, is crunching numbers, which I said when I said Excel is not a project management tool, I meant it's not a project scheduling tool. But for crunching numbers, it's awesome. So I crunch the numbers and I sit down with one of the major stakeholders on the project, not the sponsor yet. And I say, "Hey, here's what I'm looking at. There's no break even point. Every month we keep this thing alive costs this organization X amount of dollars. And we're never going to get the money back because proposal numbers are made up. We're not closing 50% of all the proposals that go out." The person looked at it and said, I don't know, this can't be right. So then he starts digging through the numbers and he realizes that I am right. So then we go back to the sponsor on that project and said, "Listen, there is no break even point here. Like, we're already in the hole. This thing is never going to pay for itself." The person was very just shocked, completely shocked. And, in many ways, I blame the group that was managing the project before I stepped in to help out, because they should have been monitoring that. They should have been doing that impartial third party, cynical look at everything and say, is this a good project or not? Somebody just running around saying how excited they are, how this thing is going to be the best thing since sliced bread, since ice cream, whatever. And it wasn't, because no one looked at the numbers. They felt good. Everything felt good. Everything's going to go great, and they went ahead and kept moving forward with it. The end result was that the sponsor left, the senior person from the project management group left, and they had to bring someone else in to basically shut it down. I looked at it as a success. I mean, sure, I didn't point fingers at anybody. It was obvious what had happened there. But the success was that, as a project manager, applying my skills and the tools and experience to the project, just using basic project management stuff like looking at the numbers, running some forecasts, I was able to show that we were in the hole, and it was time to pull the plug in that. So to me, I felt it was a huge success. And I often would bring it up when I was doing training. Like, sometimes your greatest success as a project manager is identifying that a project is a dog. Well, dogs are good. Let's call it something else. The project is a venomous snake, and you need to get rid of it because it's costing everybody, it's costing too much money. It's never going to pay off. And it's not always a comfortable position to be in, but that's the job. That is the job, is to basically make sure that everybody has the information they need in order to make good decisions in terms of the progress on that project. And hey, why don't you forward this to a few people? Maybe like to some people where maybe you're on a project where it stinks. It's never going to make any money. Just send it to them and say, "Hey, look at this idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about." Hopefully, they'll listen and they'll know you. Maybe he does know what he's talking about. Anyway, make sure you subscribe. I enjoy doing these, and I'd love to do more. I just like to make sure that it's worth it. If 10 people watch or listen, I mean, the numbers are pretty good right now, so I'm not complaining. But the more people that watch, the more people that respond, that forward, that subscribe, it just makes it feel like it's more of people actually want this out there. I'm not just some old man ruminating on glory days.